these are all tough acts to follow. I want to thank Koga for inviting me here, in part because I love Denver and I love Colorado for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you in a minute that may be changing. But and I want to thank Tisha for her introduction, and I apologize for not giving you any personal information. So I'll fill in a little bit to start. Since sports seems to be the theme here, I figure the right sport to be focusing on now, coming from Boston, in case you can't tell from my accent, is hockey, where we're the reigning world champions. But I also thought it'd be a good topic to bring up here because it wasn't that long ago that we shipped to you one of the best players in the league and got you guys a Stanley Cup as well. So on the downside, in a couple of weeks, I am personally giving you something else. I'm giving you my son, who's starting at UC Boulder in a couple of weeks. And in almost a cruel joke, this morning at 4:37 in the morning, I was awoken by a BlackBerry email message from the bursar's office that told me I had to ship you guys $22,000 for the privilege. So in case there's really nothing of value in my presentation, at least I'm helping you out in a more direct way. So there have been a lot of the discussion, obviously, so far has been on what are the regulatory challenges associated with extracting resources and capitalizing on the vast resources that we have available. Let me see if I can bring this up. Thank you. So I think a lot of the discussion, again, has been on the supply side and what are the regulatory challenges to making sure we capitalize on the potential of this resource, both from a prudent development perspective and from a regulatory perspective. I thought I would shift laterally and talk a little bit about the demand side in terms of what are the regulatory challenges to having a market for the use of all of the gas that may be coming our way in the next couple of decades. So I'll talk a bit about focusing on the electricity sector, which I think, at least for the near term, for some of the reasons that John was discussing, is in the near term, one of the biggest opportunities for growing demand for natural gas, at least in the U.S. I'll talk a little bit about the mutual interest between the electric and natural gas industries and what is unique about the timing and opportunity we have available to us right now. And then talk a little bit about what I think the regulatory challenges are to really accelerating the growth of natural gas use in the power sector over the next several years and what some of the options are for addressing those challenges. One thing I clearly don't need to do is repeat for all of you what you've heard it again and again in terms of the truly incredible potential for development of natural gas and shale and other unconventional plays across the country. North American shale gas is, in terms of technically recoverable resources, measures now in the thousands of TCF. And global resources are also large. And when thinking about the level of global demand for natural gas now, and even some reasonable projections of that, compared to the level of global resources that we appear to be able to recover, potentially at reasonable rates for some time, the supply is clearly looking like it will outstrip demand for a while. When you think in terms of demand here in the U.S., the transportation sector is obviously a huge potential growth in demand, but that's a much longer-term prospect. And in the commercial and residential sectors, the potential for growth in demand seems modest at best. So what I wanted to do, just for example purposes here, is focus in on potential growth in demand in the electric sector as being the largest, at least near-term, potential growth market. So the electric sector represents a good opportunity for natural gas, but it works the other way around as well. The electric sector needs natural gas as a fuel for a number of reasons. It can be located close to load. And I say that as a resident of the Northeast, one of the most populous areas of the entire country, and one which has a history of opposing large energy infrastructure projects. Just in the past 10 or 12 years, we've cited over 10,000 megawatts of new gas-fired generation within New England, and just demonstrating how much easier it is to site a natural gas facility than some of the other more traditional, fossil nuclear energy technologies. Natural gas can meet critically needed, particularly in regions that are looking to add a lot of renewable generation, some critically needed operability needs for power system operations. Very short response times when called upon, starting from a cold start, has good ramping and load following characteristics to handle net load variability, and can work in a variety of operating modes as a base load resource, intermediate resource, or a peaking resource. It has an acceptable environmental profile from air, water, and waste perspectives, and it can help address the climate challenge. It has a manageable capital investment profile as well, at least compared to other potential options for meeting increasing demand, and if the resource can be realized at prices that are being projected over the longer term, can even have a potentially stable and acceptable fuel and O&M impact. All of this is important in my view because we are sitting at a really very unique moment. It's not only a transformational period in the natural gas industry, it's also a transformational period in the electric industry. The chart I'm showing here really just shows the potential impact estimated by the North American Electric Reliability Council for attrition of existing coal and oil-fired generation across the country associated with the EPA requirements that John mentioned. It amounts to between 46 and 76 gigawatts of potential attrition by 2018. And again, due only to EPA requirements, but as John mentioned, there are a lot of other factors that make a lot of the older, less efficient generating units we have in the country look less tenable over the next decade in terms of continued operation, including economics. Some problems that have been found in some regions with respect to deteriorating performance of the older units, which makes it more difficult to meet reserve requirements through the operation of older units that tend to break down when you turn them on, when you need them for quick start purposes. And then finally, the risk of CO2 controls may seem distant now, but it's always looming over some of the oil and coal generating resources as well. So the real question is, can natural gas take advantage of a market opportunity that's sitting upon us right now? So what are the challenges to doing it? And I think it's important to think about these sooner rather than later because the time is now where we may see a significant turnover of the generation fleet in the country. I've just highlighted 4. There are probably many more. Some of the ones that I've highlighted are certainly not issues at all in Colorado or some of the western states, but definitely are issues in areas that are highly dependent upon natural gas generation already, like Texas and the Southwest and California and the Northeast. The first one relates to the performance of gas-fired generation when it's needed, when it's called upon. We've seen problems with this, obviously, most recently in February 2010 in the Southwest. But also, we've seen this affect power system operations several times over the past decade in the Northeast. And it relates to a significant loss of available generating capacity, particularly tied to periods of winter peak gas demand. The absence of available generating capacity, typically in my region of the country, we are a summer peaking system for electricity. So in the winter, you would think there would be less of a need for operation of the gas-fired generation, but there absolutely is. When we are so dependent upon natural gas for power generation that when you get to the winter peak for electricity, which coincides with the winter peak for heating and commercial uses for natural gas, there a very large portion of our natural gas fleet needs to be available and on, and we've run into problems. We ran into problems in 2004, again in 2009, and again this year. And there are a number of causes that lead to this lack of availability of gas generation during the times of winter peak, including the fact that it's simply too expensive and seems not necessary for gas-fired generation to enter into firm contracts for gas supply and transportation. The economics of gas versus electricity prices has come into play. In the 2004 cold snap in the Northeast, there were literally power generating owners, facility owners, that were declaring themselves ineligible for electricity generation because it was far more profitable to take the gas that they did have title to, turn it around and sell it in the gas market, than to turn it into electricity and sell it in the electricity market. Another problem is that there is a discontinuity currently, and a lot of folks are working on this right now, between the intraday scheduling of natural gas commitments and electricity commitments. In the electricity market, they bid in a day ahead, but at that point in time, they do not necessarily know what magnitude of the gas supply they will have to operate. And so there's a very severe discontinuity that can affect operations, particularly during tight gas supply conditions. And then there's this looming issue that even if you can secure firm supply and transportation in a number of states at least, certainly Texas and a few states in the Northeast, there is either required by law or by regulation priority supply of natural gas to residential and small commercial customers, as well as hospitals and schools and things like that, so that regardless of what type of contractual arrangement I have as a power generator, if conditions are tightening the gas supply in the region, the first valves that will be turned off will be large industrial and power generating facilities. So it's an issue that just needs to be kept in the back of the mind in terms of reconciling state laws and policy requirements with solutions to the problems related to performance of gas generation. The last thing I'll note is that the performance issues are not necessarily only tied to winter peak conditions. We had a situation in September in New England where there was a major electric system contingency. That meant that we really, really needed a lot of the gas-fired generation online, and there were some problems with respect to the response of the gas-fired generation. So these are all challenges that I'm raising again just to highlight some of the things that I think really need to be dealt with very quickly in order to provide for the accelerated increase in natural gas demand by the power sector. The second challenge that I want to mention quickly is natural gas infrastructure contingencies. A lot of the power supply systems across the country are now looking at the connection of gas-fired generation to major gas infrastructure in the region and thinking about what does that imply in terms of our planning for reliability. Like right now in power systems, they'll typically plan to have enough resources online, spinning, and available in the event that there are two major losses to the system, a loss of the two largest generating facilities or the largest generating facility and the largest transmission line. What hasn't been looked at until recently is contingencies that are associated with the infrastructure of the gas infrastructure in the region. For example, in New England, we're essentially at the end of a lot of pipelines. And if you look at the amount of gas-fired capacity that's connected to any single pipeline, you don't have to do more than simple math to realize that if we were to lose that pipeline suddenly, that you would have a loss of power generating capacity that vastly exceeds what the power systems currently plan to for reliability planning. So it's an issue that needs to be looked at and considered very carefully.